All right, I just got this envelope from daycare and it's gonna tell me how much I can expect to pay after our tuition rate goes into effect. So I wanna show you what we're gonna be paying for 2 kids in full-time daycare. All right, for context, before I break down this pricing, I have 2 kids in full-time daycare. So my oldest is 4.5, she's in a pre-K room, and my youngest is almost 3, so she's technically in a preschool room. And actually, both of those rooms have the same rate now. All right, this is the rates for next year. My daughters each go for 5 days a week. The daily rate is $78 a day. And so the total for each child is $20,280, but technically we get a sibling discount. So one of the kids is slightly lower. I think we save $170 a month for the sibling discount, which better than nothing. So that's gonna leave us with a grand total of $3,211 a month. Now, for context, right now I am paying $3,027 a month, but 6 months ago I was paying $3,393 a month. And so recently our rate went down because my youngest daughter moved into a preschool room. And this is the thing about daycare. When you sign up for daycare, they'll give you this tuition sheet and it's going to show you the pricing, and the pricing depends on how old the kids are. So when they're infants, they are most expensive, and when they're like preschool, pre-K, it's least expensive. And so people often budget around this idea that it's going to get less expensive as the kids get older. But what tends to happen is as soon as your kid ages up and the daily rate goes down, the tuition increase comes into effect, right? And so back in September, I was paying $3,393. Right now, for the next 6 months, I'll be paying $3,027. But come next September, I will be back up to $3,211. So year over year, it's only $100 difference in rates because the tuition increase. And this is something that a lot of people don't account for. They don't realize when they're budgeting that yes, the cost goes down, but daycare increases are anywhere between like 5 to 20% a year. And so you really need to bake that in. And so like, yes, infants are the most expensive. They will always be the most expensive. Preschool, pre-K is less expensive, but it's not that much less expensive at the end of the day because those increases, they come into play and they bring you very close to where you were when your kids were in a toddler or infant room.
Have you seen the daycare costs these days? $2,200 a month for one child. I was talking to this mom at a birthday party this weekend, and she was telling me that she went and got a job for $65,000. And I was like, oh, that's really awesome because her husband makes great money, but they wanted extra money. She said the only downside is that I need to have a nanny come Monday through Friday, and it costs me $2,200 a month. And I don't have kids, so I never even thought of that before. And you know me with my numbers, started having a conversation with her. I said, well, what's your take-home pay, if you don't mind me asking? And she said about $4,000. She goes, so that's the tough part here is that after the daycare cost, I'm only really pocketing $1,800 a month, and then it's $300 in gas because the commute's very far. So I'm really going to work for 40 hours a week and only pocketing $1,500. So I'm wondering if I even made a mistake here and they're trying to figure this all out. And we look at people who have a job at $65,000 or $80,000 or a couple who's making $120,000, and you're like, how can you not afford this? Like, this doesn't make sense. But when you really break it down, her take home of that $65K is only $18,000 a year. So some people, that $1,500 a month is make or break. But I'm curious if she's going to end up moving forward with that job because once they saw the numbers. But I was blown away because I've never looked into daycare costs before. Are you all finding that daycare per child is what, $1,000, $2,000 a month? What's your experience with that?
How on earth are y'all affording daycare? Because I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this bad. My husband and I went in toward a daycare today. I don't fully know what I'm planning on doing next, but we wanted to make sure that we were prepared with childcare when I figure it out. You know, I've heard all the horror stories. Wait lists are super long. It's really hard to get a spot. We wanted to go ahead and get ahead of it, get them on a wait list. So we tour this place. It's really nice. It's beautiful. It's clean, good staff, good ratios, good safety measures, really close to the apartment. We're feeling great about it. It lines up with all of our online research that we did. Things look good. But a fun thing about most daycares that you find out when you're looking at daycares is they don't put the pricing online. You don't get to know that information until you go and have a tour. So we go, we do the tour, we ask all of our questions, we're very impressed, we love the place, it seems like a great fit. She hands us the packet at the end with the tuition listed on it. For the toddler room, it is $405 a week. That is a little bit over $1,600 a month. I'm sorry, what? Again, I knew it was expensive, but even in Nashville, I feel like the numbers I'd seen before was like $1,300, maybe $1,400 a month on the upper end. But I guess a lot of the research I had done on pricing was maybe like pre-inflation, maybe it was a little bit outdated. $1,600 a month. The way I just had to sit there with a completely straight face, like, yes, that is a reasonable number that does not make me want to throw up at all. I am just shocked And maybe I shouldn't be, but I just am. Because that is not a number that most people can reasonably pay without a second income already in place. So yeah, we can put him on the wait list, like they have a spot open for him right now if I wanted. There is no way for him to start daycare until I either have a job in place and I'm getting a paycheck actively, or if I'm in school and I already have student loans dispersed in order to pay that cost. Looking at that, it's not surprising to me that a parent would choose to stay home instead of doing all of that. It's very stressful, like knowing that you cannot have daycare until you start a job so that you have money to pay for that daycare. But you also can't start a job without daycare in place. So much like juggling of logistics. It's really stressful. That's just me being horrified. Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one to figure out.
When somebody tells you they can't afford to have children, this is what they're talking about. A woman in my town's Facebook group shared these daycare rates today, and she said, how do you afford kids here? Because nobody knows how anybody is paying for this. For an infant for 5 days a week with 10 hours of care, it is $664 a week. That is just shy of $35,000 a year for one child. And the price does not drop that much when they hit pre-K here. It's $521 a week, which is about like $28,000 a year, okay? These are incredibly high rates for daycare. And of course, you could drop down to 9 hours a day or whatever it might be. But here's the thing. When you go to daycare, typically you're going to take the most hours because you have to commute to work, you have to commute back from work, and you have to work 8 hours a day. And unfortunately, when you miss pickup by 1 minute, they start charging you like $2 a minute. So usually it's more cost effective just to pay the higher rate for the 10 hours than to pay for the 9 hours, which is like crazy because it's 1 hour difference. These are rates for one kid. We were talking about one child. Imagine if a family has 2 kids. They're paying $50,000, $60,000 a year for childcare. That is unsustainable for most families. And yes, the cost goes down slightly as they get older. But what that doesn't account for, that rate sheet, is the annual increase. Every single September, daycare centers raise their tuitions because they have to. And typically that's anywhere between 5 to 20%. And most people are looking at 10% increase. So even though you have that savings when they hit pre-K, by the time your kid hits pre-K, it's been 4 or 5 years. That rate has gone up exponentially, okay? So when someone tells you they can't afford to have children, oftentimes it's because of the cost of childcare. And if it's not just the cost of childcare, it's the cost of housing and groceries, and you compound all those things, healthcare costs, it's incredibly expensive. I did not know, looking back 4 or 5 years ago when I first started having kids, that I would be paying this much money for daycare because the rates looked drastically different. The rates over the last 20 years or something have gone up like 200%. It is wild how expensive childcare is in our country. If we had affordable childcare, it would not only benefit families and children, it would benefit the economy, it would benefit businesses, and it would benefit us as a greater society. The economy would be better for it. This is not just a parent problem, right? But like people constantly are looking at adults who are married or of, birthing years and saying, why aren't you having kids? And we're looking around saying, how could we possibly have kids when we can't even afford to buy a house?
How much are you all paying for daycare? I've got 2 kids, okay? I am paying $2,675, and that is with a sibling discount. My daughter, who just moved up from the infant room, when she was in the infant room, her tuition was $1,764 a month. $1,700. How can anybody afford daycare? My son, he's 4, so he's in pre-K right now. His tuition is $1,161 a month. Can he be in kindergarten yet? Can I enroll him? I have 1 more year. Drop in the comments how much you guys are paying for daycare.
How much do you pay for daycare? We live in Massachusetts where childcare is definitely very expensive, but I know it's expensive everywhere. And we pay about $25,000, a little more than that a year for one child. And when my baby starts and we're paying for 2 children, it's going to be, we just got that quote, so it's going to be over $1,000 a week for the 2 of them. Luckily, we'll only have about like 6 months of overlap because then my daughter will be doing summer camps, and which will be cheaper, and then going to kindergarten. And we'll still have to pay for aftercare, but it will not be nearly as much as paying for 2 in daycare. So yeah, what do you pay for daycare and where do you live?
What if childcare costs are so expensive because there is a lack of grandparents' willingness to help watch the kids while the parents...
Okay, grandmother here weighing in. Actually, my grandkids call me Gigi. But in your video, you said that grandparents' unwillingness to watch their grandkids full time is basically causing young families to not be able to make it as much as we did. All right. Well, the one thing that I want to correct you on that is it's not that grandparents are unwilling to watch their grandchildren. It's that grandparents are still working full time. I actually have some friends that not only are they grandparents, but they still have teenagers at home. So they are working full time and still raising kids. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane, they always tell you to put on your oxygen mask first before you help a loved one. Well, if you ask your parents to watch your kids for you and they have to quit their jobs and now it's a detriment to them, that doesn't actually help anybody. Now, it was different when I was growing up. I am Gen X, all right? So on the weekends, when I was growing up in the 80s, my mom was able to drop us off at my grandparents' house. My grandmother was silent generation. My mom was a boomer. All right, a lot of the silent generation were single working families, meaning the woman usually was at home. So she had the ability to be able to help watch her grandkids because she didn't work. They usually had the husband that was working. Now, my mom's generation, my mom and my stepdad both worked full time. And then you come to my generation, I worked full time. Me and my husband at the time were both active duty military. I couldn't drop my kids off at all because half the time we were stationed overseas. So when I was raising my kids, there was no me dropping them off at grandparents because I was stationed over in Japan or California or way away from where my grandparents are. As a reality, my kids growing up only saw their grandparents once a year, and normally that was at Christmas, right? Now, I was lucky. I am a grandparent that could help out and watch my grandkids a lot more if they lived closer, right? So I was in the military for 22 years, and then I retired at 41 years old. I was very blessed to be able to do that. Then I started working corporate. I stayed in the corporate world for 6 years. Once my kids started having kids, then I was able to retire, and we actually had a room here in our house that we were watching our granddaughter when she was first born to help my daughter out. And then she got offered a job 3 hours away, which I would definitely say go do what's best for your family. If there's a job that's paying more, you need to go there. But like, do you expect me to drive 3 hours away to go see my grandkids or just to babysit? And I think a lot of this generation is looking at grandparents as babysitters, where you should be looking, yes, I would think that you would want your grandparents, your parents in your kids' lives, because I do think it's important for their development. I love spending time with our grandkids. We do drive the 3 hours and we go pick them up and keep them for a week. Usually every month we go and see our grandkids, or they come here and they stay. But I think the expectation that a lot of this generation is expecting grandparents to watch their grandkids full time is not realistic, because in this economy, most grandparents, like I said, are still working full time just to support themselves. Now, when you say that you see them posting pictures on their Facebook saying, "Oh, here's my grandkids," but they don't actually spend time with them, no, that's shitty. I don't think you should do that. Like, we adore our grandkids and we want to be part of their life because we think that what we have to offer and our knowledge and where we are in life, when they come to our house, we treat them like Gen Xers. We go out and we get dirty and we play, and it gives my daughter a break, and I love to be able to do that. But more importantly, I don't want to be my grandkids' babysitter. I want to be an advocate for my grandkids, and I want to be in my grandkids' lives. Daycare sucks, and the daycare cost absolutely is atrocious in this country, and I wish if there was anything we could change, it was to help subsidize that, because we all know, especially for single parents that have to pay for daycare or dual working families, it takes the majority of their paycheck. But I don't know how to fix that, because then if you bring down daycare, like daycare workers, a lot of them are already getting paid minimum wage. How much less do you expect them to get paid? So I think that we need to look at alternatives to daycare before we say that the grandparents are basically at fault.
I'm sorry, but how can people afford daycare? Like, if you have two working parents, how is it possible to afford daycare full time? We are blessed to have 2 days that my mother-in-law watches the boys, which is wonderful. But we have friends that send their kids to daycare all week, and individually each kid is $70 a day. That means if you have two kids, it's $140. So overall, that equals out to at least $35,000 for the year. It literally leaves you with like nothing left. Sorry, but the US system is not made for two parents to be working. It literally is not. And some days I'm like, why do I even work? I don't know. And I feel like nowadays we are It is becoming more common and more accepting that mothers stay home. I'm not knocking on daycares either, because bless their hearts, I could never stay home with 5 kids that are not my own. But even them, like, they don't make that much money. People in daycare don't even make that much money. And you look at other countries, I don't know. We need to start paying people more. We just need to start paying people more. They can afford daycare. Or we just need to make it more accepted that mothers stay home, that they can be stay-at-home moms.
The cost of childcare is crazy and unsustainable. I understand why nannies are paid what they are, and while I understand daycare, you know, I want my kids to be in the safest environment possible. I'm just saying, honestly, it's crazy. And I mean that from a ratio of income to childcare. I just got an email that my 4-year-old was accepted to a daycare that we applied in 2024. I don't mean 2024. We applied in 2020 for the daycare. So 4 years later, they finally have a spot because Charlotte, North Carolina is insane for daycares right now. They said, no problem. We just need a down payment and we need a month of the daycare, $2,400. I have 3 kids under 4. $2,400, and then they'd give a discount to my second for $2,200. If you add in my third, it's going to come to about $6,800 a month for daycare that's only from 9 to 2 a day. I'd have to be providing my own snacks and everything for the babies. $81,600. At that point, it's better for me not to work. What? I feel so defeated in this economy. $82,000. If I were to make a salary and then get the taxes, insurance, and everything off of it, it would be equivalent to about a $130,000 job. What are people doing? How are they surviving? I'm about ready to sell my feet pictures. Let me know.
You should have known daycare cost that much. As a father of now 3, I knew full well before I even started hunching how much daycare was about to cost me. I have 3 daughters under 7, all of which are about to be in daycare for the summer. I saw a video of a dad talking about, we just had our second baby and my wife sent me the daycare prices. How did you not know that already? I knew at the time of conception, I'm about to have a spring baby, which meant my baby's not gonna go to daycare till the summer. You know who else is gonna be at daycare in the summer? My 6-year-old, along with my 4-year-old. And keep in mind, daycare for a newborn is much more expensive than daycare for older kids. Kids are expensive. And if you don't know that before going for baby number 2, why are you having baby number 2? This shouldn't come as a shock to you. You should already know every expense down to a T because you had number 1 already. And I get it. We all don't have support systems to watch the kids. We all need to work. Not everybody can do the 1 income household. But especially before you have baby number 2, you should definitely know the prices of daycare.